Well, hi everyone. Yeah, sorry, it's another Matt. I know we're not uncommon. Thank you for having me. Great to be here. As a quick intro, I'm Matt Thomas. I'm a growth marketer or growth marketing specialist. My whole career has been in growth and marketing, and I'd say probably 80% of that has been at early stage startups or venture-backed startups of different sizes. Most recently, I was working at the AA within their venture builder, helping them with the launch of a new mobile app. But I've just recently moved back to sort of full-time consulting and advising startups. My startup experience, I began my startup journey as the first employee at a brand new pre-launch startup, joining the founder and the co-founder at a business called Debut. I was lucky enough to stay at that business for 4 years and see that business grow, help that business to acquire lots of users, raise a really healthy round of investment, and build out the marketing and growth team over the course of 4 years. After that, I didn't really know what I wanted to do straight after that, so I sort of did some traveling and I ended up freelancing while I was sort of working out what to do next. And I've just been consulting and working with early stage founders and their teams ever since. And I've worked with some amazing businesses over the last 5 years, ranging from brand new ventures, unfunded ventures, to some very established tech businesses with a lot of backing. And I help those businesses with a range of things from growth strategy, growth process, experimentation, performance marketing, analytics, attribution. So all the sort of more sort of tech data sort of aligned aspects of growth. And I love working with startups. I'll tell everyone that will listen. It's so much fun. It's the cutting edge of the technology. You're always learning. And if you're comfortable with the sort of messy and unstructured nature of it, then it's a great thing to do. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Just for a bit of context, Matt, in the cohort, we've got it's about 45 companies, and every week they have to provide a growth update. So in week one, they identified a couple of metrics that were important to them that they wanted to measure throughout the course of the program, and they set themselves a target for where they want to be by their final update, and then they're kind of updating weekly on progress. The top 20% of kind of founders that have shown the most growth are then selected to pitch on stage at demo day and final event, so they have more opportunities to get in front of investors. So it's very timely that the founders here want kind of tactical tips on how to improve their growth, because not only do they want to do that anyway as founders, but they especially want to do it as part of this program because it holds them in a better position for the final events for this cohort. So
Right.
and in terms of stage, the majority of them have raised before, or they've got early revenues, but they might have just launched a beta version of a product and they haven't actually launched the full version of the product, or maybe they have, but they're in the very early stages. So I'm going to take it back to that kind of point in time, with a bit of a broad question, which is, if you are launching something, full launch or a beta, what tactics do you recommend that have worked well in your experience to get that initial hit of traction or excitement building with customers?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think there's going to be a lot of difference between for different types of businesses, especially across B2B versus B2C. I think there's a lot of pros and cons that I'd start off by saying that you need to sort of just be mindful of, rather than saying there's absolute things you have to do over others at this really early stage. I think the key is knowing why you're doing, why you want to do one activity over another. What is the goal? Always have a goal with every activity that you're doing, rather than doing things because you think you should be doing them or because you've seen other startups doing them. I think that's a probable mistake in a lot of cases. My recommendation is always remain as agile as possible here. There's no point planning really far in advance. Sort of month to month is okay when you're at this stage. Definitely no point buying sort of months worth of media or committing to sort of big spend up front here. So in in terms of like the acquisition then, so I think a lot of startups default to social, like social advertising, performance marketing, Google AdWords and the like. And there are benefits to that. You know, you get a lot of immediacy. You know, I think, you know, it's kind of a shortcut to getting traffic and testing, you know, very quickly. And that's great. You know, I think most of you will probably build that into what you're doing. I think the thing to be mindful with that is once you stop, if you haven't got that end goal in mind, there's no legacy to that. It does just turn off. So, you know, make sure that you have in your plan for that what you want to achieve and what feedback you want from that. Even if it's not successful, there's some kind of learning objective associated with it, whether it's, you know, testing your value proposition, audience targeting, messaging, whatever it is. So that, yeah, that's sort of, you know, key takeaway with that. I think with engagement, this is a tough one because I think it's about, it's very product specific. It's about breaking your journey down into stages and measuring each of those stages of the process and working out how to optimize each individual step in that journey layer by layer. So, you know, optimizing the sign up flow first and the onboarding flow and so on and so forth. A lot of that is in product. So it's improving that UI and the messaging and sort of personalizing that activation process. But then there is, you know, obviously some engagement hooks and tactics as well. So, you know, getting messages back to users in a timely fashion. You know, users' attention decays very, very quickly. So having a structured process to get people back in and messaging them at the right time, and you know, that's always a test as well. I think is really important. I think, you know, with that, you know, I think it's Sean Ellis and Morgan Brown, who wrote Hacking Growth, talk a lot about the aha moment, which is the moment that like a product really demonstrates its, you know, its utility to its user base. The goal is, how do you get people to that point as fast as possible? How do you get them to the point where they know this product is a must-have as fast as possible? So everything, I think, in this, you know, if you're trying to drive engagement, should be with that in mind, and be engaging them, you know, to this point where, you know, it's going to be a lot easier to retain them going forward.
When you were doing,
sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, can you give an example from when you were working with that first startup that you were just talking about in your intro, that you joined pre-launch? What did you do? I know it's going to be very nuanced and specific to that business, but it might have some kind of applications in there that other people find interesting.
Yeah, so that first startup for me was a student career platform. I think one of the hacks that worked just really well straight off the bat was like being really public with the recruiting businesses that were using the platform, which took a little bit of work because you know, getting permission to use their logos in advertising and messaging and sort of showcasing what was there. But the credibility boost from that and the impact on, you know, the onboarding process from that was massive. Yeah, that it is a very specific example, but you know, I think that for us was a bit of a game changer, and we kind of built a lot off that, you know, and extended that thinking into advertising and, you know, using that wherever we could. So that would be one hack there.
Sorry, yeah, thank you. I don't know if you were going to finish what you were saying before, but if not, I can jump on to the next question.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add that, like, I think one thing to be mindful of at this launch stage is I think a lot of people jump into acquisition, you know, very full-blooded, which is, you know, is good, but, you know, I think the bigger problem is at the early stages, are you able to retain those customers? You know, it's very exciting to go out and find users, but if they actually don't stick, then it's wasted resource. And, you know, for me, the priority is always, can you engage them? Can you keep them? Can you get them what you want them to do once you actually have them, first and foremost? So yeah, just wanted to add that.
What do you think about, based on that, what do you think about wait lists and people that are collecting customer data in advance whilst they're going through a funding round or something? Like they can't build what exactly they want to build until they get the funding, but they want to prove that there's some demand for what the product is going to be. Yeah. Do you think keep people engaged with a wait list?
I think it's really hard to keep people engaged with the wait list, and you can build out a nice sort of long sequence, structured way of drip feeding out, what you're building, what you're solving, and trying to involve them in that as much as possible, and that will go some way to kind of reducing the decay that will be, that will naturally happen with that list. It's very easy for people to just put their name down with something, but they'll forget within a month. So if you're using it as a low, it's a very low cost way to demonstrate demand at this early stage, I think that's fine. And you can still get a kick from, having that bank to go to when you are ready to launch, or, as a initial testers or whatever. I think that's really good, but you have to be very mindful to keep them engaged and keep feeding them. Otherwise, if you get those emails and then you don't talk to them for 3 months, like the conversion on that's going to be just really poor.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if you kind of have a campaign that gets people to your website, let's say, and then at the point that they're on your website, you want them to do something, which might be have a call to have a trial or sign up for a free week or whatever it might be that the founders want them to do. What have you found works best in terms of a call to action if you've now got them onto your site, so you've acquired them, but then you want to do something more?
Yeah, I mean, discounts go a long way if it's sort of a one-time purchase. I think that people do sort of recall those in their inbox. I think it's hard to make commitments when it comes to pricing around subscription, because I think so much of that you need a level of ability to change that and move that over time. So you can end up like committing to something that you might not be able to sustain. But it's I think it's on a case by case basis with that. I mean, I've had a lot of joy with going, if you're solving a really specific problem, and there's a lot of people that are really passionate about that problem, then bringing them into the process early and sort of building a sort of micro community. You can give them a name, you can give them some status from doing that. Make them part of the business almost, make them feel like they're part of solving the challenges to building and launching this product. I think that works really nicely, and I did that with a very specific community for a finance product a couple of years back, and I was amazed at how passionate some people were about solving this really, what I thought was quite a niche. Well, it was a niche problem, but no one had solved this problem for them, and they were using all kinds of hacks and workarounds to do what they needed to do. So if you can find that problem and you can offer that, then that's a great way to go, I think.
Interesting. Yeah. Is there anything else you recommend? So founders who don't have that much money, or they have limited resources also in terms of their time, and they're looking to acquire users, drive growth. You said that a lot of people just revert to socials. What would you recommend that they do if they are using socials, or if not?
Yeah, well, I think every founder I've met is, there's all resources always a challenge, right? If you've got no one's got loads of money to burn, and even if you have a large budget, I think it just comes with more expectations. So like it's not always a good thing, but bootstrapping at the early stage, and when I say bootstrapping, I mean like you get traffic and attention without spending however you can. Recommendations here might be, first of all, like go where the users are. Like if you have an idea to solve a unique problem where there's a really specific group that you are that makes up your audience, then where are they? And think about that in terms of like the stages of like awareness that they have. So if you think they move from like completely unaware of the problem to like problem aware to solution aware, like where are they at each stage of that journey? Is there forums that they're frequenting? Is there a subreddit that you could potentially go to? Are there influencers in this space that talk about this specifically? Try and find where they are and be where they are, and that's not always easy, and you can't always buy that, right? If it's something like a Reddit forum, like you've got to work really hard to get access to that, and and you do that by by added value. Like you know, you've got to go, you've got to go cap in hand almost sometimes and say, look, we're trying to solve this problem. Can you help us solve this problem? Here's what we'll do in exchange. We'll give you, the community a discount when it's ready. But ultimately, we just want your input, because ultimately that makes a better product that helps us solve the problem. So that, if you've got sort of a lack of resource, then those are the kind of things that I think you should be doing. Podcasts are great. They're another one. Like, podcasters can be very niche. They're always content hungry. That they kick out so much. So I've seen a lot of founders do well by just talking on podcasts. And again, it's about not just plugging your product or plugging your idea. It's about how do you have a conversation with this and start, a dialogue that can be maintained. So yeah, those are sort of two. And then the second recommendation I have here is like, don't. At this early stage, when you've got sort of limited resource, and that applies to both, what you can spend and your time, don't spread yourself too thin. Don't try to, you might have tons of ideas and you might think, great, let's grow, like we'll do, these 15 different things. But when you do that, it becomes much harder for you to learn from what you're doing. The attribution of where users are coming from becomes harder. You can't work out what activity actually delivered versus what didn't. From a like statistics standpoint, like your experiments you need multiple, multiplies out the amount of traffic you need to like validate, test on landing pages and things like that. So it's just a case of probably, sometimes a little bit less is more, and walk before you run, just at that first stage, I think.
Yeah. On that point, if someone's got, let's say one of the founders here has sort of 15 different things that they can do, or they've already been doing 15 different things, and they want to assess what to continue doing or what to halt on, what benchmark should people be looking at in terms of what good looks like? Is there a benchmark for, if you do X, your acquisition should be Y, or if your results are like below this, then it's probably not worth continuing with that channel or that type of engagement?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really cautious with benchmarks. I think like it's, what I've seen is like so many startups measure what is in theory the same metric in different ways. So like if you compare them, it's like you're not really comparing apples with apples. So there's that to bear in mind. And then there's no two sets of circumstances are the same. Like even if something, a business is in your space and you can see sort of this is what they managed to achieve in this amount of time, but you just don't know what goes on behind the scenes. You don't know what environmental factors were involved in that. So you can end up, I think, with a bit of a false comparison. So I think use them, but they're, if you can get reasonable benchmarks, they're a guiding hand, and don't beat yourself up if like they're not, you can't achieve them. So like then, when it comes to like what do you measure and what do you use to kind of say if something has been successful and to do more of? Well, I think, start from the bottom up with that. What is the end goal? Is it like, for growth, it's probably like CAC LTV ratio of whatever, and then break that down into what are the proxies for that? Because you're never going to be able to measure that straight off the bat. But it's higher quality customers that retain longer, lower cost to acquire customers, more revenue per user, those kind of things. And if you can measure those and attribute those back to the activity that you're doing, and again, it comes back to don't do too many things at once, because you'll lose sight of what's impacting that goal. Then use those as proxies, and use that to determine what you should do more or less of. One thing to bear in mind there, at this very early stage, I don't think anything should be considered absolutely fine. Something might not work now, but it doesn't necessarily mean it can't work in the future, because you don't have, you're not going to have very sophisticated, attribution in place. You don't necessarily have to absolutely rule everything out. If you think that, okay, well, we tried it didn't quite work this time, but we'll circle back and maybe try this again in the future, I think that's fine. I think that's fine to do. And if you do find, when you do find something that works, don't feel obliged that you have to pour all your resource into just that. I think there's this kind of like expectation that you have to like grow month on month, and you have to always be demonstrating that you've got more users from the last month. And I don't think that's always healthy. I think sometimes, I've seen businesses that they found something that really works from a user acquisition point of view, but they've just not been ready to add that kind of scale. And you sometimes need to say, look, we know this works, but put that to the side. We'll maintain a level of users flowing through the product, so we can continue testing, but we need to solve this issue before we add scale. I think that's fine. If you can demonstrate that you're happy to, that you want to defer that growth for that reason, I think that's a really good thing to do.
We had Tom Foster Carter on a previous program, who was the former CMO at Monzo, and he's now running his own startup called Cherry Pick, which is like a meal. It's like a competitor to Gusto, or one of those kinds of meal delivery box things. And he said that he didn't really know what messaging would resonate with his audience when they first launched the business. And so he tried like 18, 20 different messages at the same time with different campaigns that went out on socials, and he had a different landing page for every single one. So it looked there was good continuity from the user's perspective. If they saw a message about saving money on groceries, they went to a landing page that said saving money on groceries. And if they went to something that was like inspiration for new recipes, the landing page said the same thing. And then he was looking at which message had the most hits, and then which went through to the landing page, and then which ultimately spent money. What do you think about that as a technique? I don't know whether it's like contradictory a little bit to trying too many things at the same time.
If you can isolate them in that way, and you can actually get enough traffic to 10 pages, then that's great. I suppose it's a little bit of a luxury if you can kind of amplify everything you're doing by 10 variations. But if they are in isolation, that they are then valid tests, then I think that's a great thing to be able to do. I think again it comes back to, if you've got the budget resource to shortcut that with paid traffic, because no one's going to get that kind of traffic organically, straight off the bat, then you should use budget in that way to shortcut your way to insights like that are going to change everything that you do going forward.
Yeah. And if let's say you don't have the budget, but you're in the similar position of you don't necessarily know exactly what message might land the best, and there's a lot of different things that you could try. Outside of asking your community or your customers if you can do that and bring that around you and ask them for their feedback, is there any other tips of things that you could do to kind of drill down on like a smaller amount of different messages or something to test?
Beyond asking your customers?
Yeah.
I guess it comes down, I mean, there's research you can do around that. Like you can research into search volumes and how people are searching, what terms they use and how they refer to them. I think that's like a starting point. You can get estimates based on that. For example, I worked with a startup in sort of pharmaceuticals, and it was really interesting to kind of uncover the way that people search by symptoms versus condition versus, and how interchangeably they use those kind of terms. So that how do you factor that into what it is you're doing? So I think that's a good sort of starting point, and that data is really really available from Google, and you can obviously look at how people behave in talk about problems in forums and the like. So that's a good starting point.
That makes sense. And you mentioned Reddit before, and I know people might have joined Facebook groups or built Facebook groups around them. Is there any of those other kind of community spaces that you recommend people look at, even if it's just to do research of, like you say, how people are talking about a particular problem that they're having?
Yeah, again, it's very product specific, but like there are tons of like Slack groups, Discord groups, things like that popping up around around individual problems that I think are a gold mine if you can get access to. I think the challenge is, you've still got to be part of that community and add value, and not just kind of extract, if that makes sense. Like, be a contributor first and foremost, and I think that's the best way to kind of use those. I mean, Reddit is a gold mine as well. I think you can find communities for absolutely every kind of product, and everything under the sun. And you even see like things like Midjourney. There's a whole sort of Reddit thing of people just creating Midjourney and just sharing Midjourney images that they're making and the prompts they're doing them. I mean, that's just a really interesting sort of phenomenon to observe. So yeah. You find these out from your users, and you just find these from looking around and looking under rocks, really. Trying to get in where you can. Comes back to just talking to as many people as possible, and seeing how you can get involved.
Yeah, when it comes to talking to users, we have this question quite a lot, would you recommend doing a survey and trying to get, I don't know, 100 responses, for example, or having like one-on-one phone conversations for 15 minutes, half an hour if you can, and having higher quality but fewer conversations, or a blend of the two? Because I think founders are so determined to show investors especially that they've spoken to as many users as possible, so they think that survey is the best way to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this depends on what it is what are you trying to prove? I mean, if you're trying to prove that an idea has has a market, then you've got to have the numbers to kind of make it as representative as possible. But when it comes to like your product feedback and the real specifics of why, then 5 really detailed interviews, as long as you validated that those are the right people, I think they're so useful. And I think it's one thing that we don't see enough is talking to users, trying to get them in a room, workshops. It's time intensive, right? It takes a lot to do that. It's a lot of asking around to get enough people to do it. But you don't need tons of them to get that value. So it just depends on what you need.
Given that you've kind of mentored quite a few startups, and someone's actually asked a question about what exactly you did at AAX, which we can go into afterwards, but is there any common mistakes that you see founders making? And I guess on the flip side of that, like anything that founders have done particularly well that you think would be useful for this group to know about?
Yeah, and I've just seen the question popping up on the side. Yeah, it was the Automobile Association, not Alcoholics Anonymous. So yeah, so at AAX, my role there was essentially, so as you'll know, the AA is a very old business. It's got a lot of users. Its traditional business of repairing cars by the side of the road is probably not going to last forever, given that there's a lot of move to electric vehicles. There's a lot less moving parts in cars, and the business is very keen to kind of adapt and add new technological innovations to providing value for motorists. I went there initially on a short-term advisory role to help the team in sort of setting up this a new mobile app, which is essentially to help motorists understand more about their cars, using AI to predict wear and tear on vehicles and sort of offer maintenance options and things like that. So I went there to advise on that. Ended up staying for the best part of a year, helping with all kinds of projects such as setting up the analytics, building out dashboards, making sure that we actually understood what was going on from users at any one time, working really closely with the product team to kind of compare what we're seeing on the data side to what feedback was being gathered from user research and user interviews, working with like the performance marketing team, sort of test different concepts. Really quite a broad role, but very much what I'm very interested in, new products to market as quickly as possible, really. So yeah, sorry, what was this? There's a second part to your question, Ferdy.
Common mistakes that founders have made that you've supported when you're mentoring.
Yeah. So I think not speaking to users enough, first and foremost, is number one. Tunnel vision, which is a sort of byproduct of that, about like this is what we've got to build and we absolutely have to build this. Assuming product market fit like comes after acquiring users, it shouldn't. It should come first. Adding tons of users first before you get product market fit is just a waste of resource, and just I think accelerates how it accelerates the death of the startup, really. And that's sometimes quite difficult like conversation that I have with founders, because I'm a growth person, I've got a more marketing led background, so I'm generally I want to acquire users. But with that in mind, looking at engagement and retention as like key early metrics. For some, I guess like it doesn't matter quite so much if it's sort of one-time purchases in e-commerce, but you still, I think, want to understand that your product is really satisfying in whatever way you're measuring that, before you really add a ton of scale. Believing you need to spend money to grow, you have to spend a load of money on Facebook ads to grow. I don't think it's the case. What else? I think waiting for like operational for everything to line up before you start testing things and start trying to see which of those messages work and which creative ideas work. I think if the resource commitment is low and the risk is low, even if you aren't completely ready to receive users and things aren't perfect, you can still do things. Like you should still be trying to test those messages, test those ideas. So don't wait for all the stars to align to do things. So yeah, I think those.
Cool. I'm wondering whether if we have time at the end, you're happy to do maybe some examples with some of the founders in the cohort so they can tell you a bit more about their specific situation.
Yeah.
There's a few questions that have come in on the chat, so we'll run through those first, and then if you want to go through your example with Matt, then raise your hand and then we can get to you at the end. So Burak said, how to set engagement metrics of users for a platform that is at the launch phase. Burak, can you just take yourself off mute and explain a little bit more what you mean by that and add any context for Matt? If you are there. Burak, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you just explain a little bit more your question?
Yeah, my question was about we are trying to launch our platform and we are trying to set some engagement metrics and goals for those metrics for our visitors, for end users. And I was wondering how we can set goals for a web platform that doesn't have that much traffic to have benchmarks to set goals.
Yeah. Would you tell me a little bit more about the platform? Like, what's the industry? What are you doing?
Yeah, sure. Basker is a platform that is trying to independent artists to get themselves crowdfunding, basically. So their followers and some investors are trying to find new artists that they can invest into. And we are trying to set goals for these end users who are visitors, not the artists, but the end users who are trying to fund these artists or invest in them, basically.
So it broke up a little bit at the end there. Do you mind just repeating that?
Yeah, sure. Basker is a platform that is trying to help independent artists to get crowdfunding from their followers. And there are also some different communities that visiting our platform through these artists who are introducing our platform to these followers, investors, whatever you can think of as an end user. And we are trying to set some engagement metrics for these users.
Okay, so I guess so like their own followers are the ones committing the resource. So
yeah, but there are also different communities on the visiting the platform that can find new artists that they like or they want to invest into. But my question was about these we are trying to set some goals for these end users, some engagement metrics, like what are the events they are doing, the average engagement time on the specific page that we are keeping track of. But we do not have that much traffic right now, and we are trying to set some goals for ourselves to keep track of or to increase. And my question was about how we can set some goals for these metrics, because we have launched a fairly early, we are at a fairly early stage, and we do not have that much data on our hands.
Yeah, okay. So I think it's a really unique and interesting challenge there. I think you're not going to find any benchmarks, I think, that are going to be useful. So I think you've got your own benchmarks to set, and you need to, whether that is,
we have a few benchmarks from like media and entertainment platforms, and also like we are keeping track of platforms like Apple Music, Spotify, and stuff like that.
So I think then comparing yourself with like really big established players is probably going to just make you feel bad, because they're probably going to have absolutely nailed this and have been able to test everything under the sun. So maybe don't lean on those too much, but just, as I said, use them like as a guiding hand. But you mentioned you've got some metrics like time on site, number of times they return, cohort retention, so month to month, are they coming back sort of every week, every month? Set those week to week, look at those week to week and track them over time. I think that's the best thing you can do at this point. And then when you see things getting better or getting worse, ask and interrogate, why is that changed this week? What did we do different? How does this align with the activity that we're doing? Is this specific sector or this specific genre, is that more receptive to this? Is that something we should look into investing in more in there rather than another? And you might you start to, I think, uncover insights into your demographic, your audience, and what it is that they're that works for them, that you can build into your tactics going forward. Does that help?
Yeah, it helps. Our insight was to actually keep track of how we are doing between time intervals, and that's what we are trying to do right now. But I wanted to ask anyways if there is a specific way to set goals for such a platform at an early stage.
I think it's just down to you. I think it's down to you and what you've seen so far. You should draw the line in the sand, and it's just got to be achievable and have a time frame on it.
Thanks. I'm just going to jump in and get to the next question. So Jennifer asked, hypothesis testing, how long do you typically run go-to-market tests for?
That's a great question. So when you are running any kind of experiment, let's say it's like a landing page experiment, you should in theory start with a goal in mind, like a conversion rate uplift that you want to see from the experiment. From that uplift, which I would say, like, you should always be doing experiments with like a minimum of a 10% uplift in the the metric. You can calculate how long that test should take to run. So the way you do that is essentially you look at, well, this is a 10% uplift. To get statistical significance on that uplift, I would need 10,000 users to hit each variation. At my current rate of getting traffic, to get 10,000 users to each of these pages is going to take 2 weeks. So that is where I stop that experiment. If after those 2 weeks you've got like a nil result or a negative result, then I think you should strongly consider stopping the test at that point. And I've got a calculator that kind of does all this, so I can share that with you.
Awesome, thank you. And a question from Maddie, do you have any preference on the best tools for researching trending search terms or keywords?
Ahrefs and SEMrush are great. I've used both of those in the past. I haven't used them in the last sort of year or so, and then they're pretty big business now, so they're adding new features all the time, but they're really good. For mobile apps, You can get a lot of good keywords, like keyword research from, I think it's AppTweaks. There's a few different sort of players in that space. AppTweak is one. Can't remember the name of the other one that I used recently. But there's two sort of, really strong ones there as well. And Google Ads, I mean, it's still great for keyword research. So use that as well.
Yeah. I've got another question in the chat from Austin, but also someone's just put that they didn't quite catch what you said. So can you type in the chat any of those tools that you just mentioned?
Yeah.
Question from Austin: any hot tips to increase conversion for a D2C brand?
Yep. Multitasking here, not my strong point. Come back to that bit. Sorry, say it again, Purdy.
Tips for increasing conversion for a D2C brand. Austin,
Yes.
if you want to give any more context, that might be helpful for Matt.
Yeah, we're a D2C fashion resale business for women's fashion. We've got decent site traffic, and I've just noticed that our conversion is hovering between kind of 0.5%. And I know some other benchmarks. I speak to other businesses; they're up to like 2%. So I know there's a lot of value in that conversion.
Yeah, so landing page tests absolutely key. You should be testing your landing pages all the time. I guess you're probably trafficking directly to the individual items, with relevant ads. I think that's fairly sort of bread and butter. But like, photography and imagery is everything in my experience in that. So that is something that I think you can get a big uplift by just making sure that that's doing really, really well, testing that to the nth degree. Creative is everything, I think, for the direct to consumer. And it feels like, with attribution becoming harder and harder and harder, and targeting becoming less of a, I suppose, less easy to sort of manipulate the targeting to get sort of in front of the right people. You're sort of allowing the platform to kind of decide a little bit more now, given just the privacy challenges that we've got at the moment, and that we'll continue to have, by the way. So like creative seems to be, becoming more and more important. So invest a lot in creative, test a lot of creative. I know that's easier said than done because it's really resource intensive to do. But I think what I see a lot of is you get like, it might take 10 variations of an ad, but then that 10, it might be one of them will deliver like outsized returns that just sort of dwarf the others. So, finding those is really important, I think.
Wicked, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we'll make sure that we get the other recommended. You just done it, nice. And then we'll go through to a couple of examples as well. So Phil, you have your hand raised. Do you want to give a bit more context of what you're working on, and we can see whether we can?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's less of an example, but more of a slightly complicated question, which is we find ourselves in a conundrum. So we are wishable, and it's an online wish list allowing you to pick anything from any site anywhere in the world and add it to your list, which you can then share. And the magic is in the back end where you can buy it in 2 clicks. But the issue is that we created a bootstrapped an MVP, proof of concept, which is a Chrome extension. And we knew that there's not huge uptake on Chrome extensions, or some people love them, lots of people have never even heard of them. And that helped us generate 100 accounts with about 15 to 20% active users. But the problem is there's not huge uptake. The other 80% don't really use Chrome extension. So we've got the funds to move forward and build an app, which is critical at iOS and Android. But I'm reluctant to try and generate too much traffic to try out a proof of concept, which is very much below the standard of what our app will be. It's because the very nature is you have to use it on your laptop rather than your phone, which immediately takes away a lot of the usability. So I'm not sure what to do, whether to grow. My instinct is to try and get more users, but I'm worried that their experience will be so below par that we may never see them again. And I just wonder what you think about that, Matt, conundrum.
So have you built the mobile app? Sorry.
We're starting to build it. Yeah, it's in progress.
And you're concerned about user experience?
With the Chrome extension, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the Chrome extension. It's just very few people use them. And so a lot of people get confused and can't be asked, to be honest.
Have you sort of gone to a group of your audience who's not sort of been exposed to your brand yet and said, what medium do you prefer to do this specific?
Yeah, very much. I mean, the mobile app is everything, but it's going to be the same audience. And yeah, we've also used Reddit, what we consider to be a Reddit hole. You can get into some very strange places down there.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's a given that the phone app is going to be far more popular, but do I get people to generate new accounts, or do I just sit back and wait for the app, which will be quite a few months down the line?
If you're certain that the market is not there for the Chrome extension, then I wouldn't invest in putting people in that product, because you're going to probably struggle to port them across, and then you're going to either you're going to have a conundrum. Do you then maintain support for 2 products rather than 1? Mobile apps are resource intensive to build and look after. Probably, I'm experienced with Chrome extensions, but I would imagine a lot more so than a Chrome extension. So
exactly right, which is why we started there. Which is tricky, because it just means we have to not get busy, which is what we want to do. We want to grow. I think we just have to be a bit patient.
Yeah, it sort of comes back to the like what I was talking about earlier about sometimes you do have to defer putting users into a product because the timing's not right. You haven't got product market fit by that emission, and that's good to know. You should be able to say, like, we're not ready to do that yet. And I think if you use this time to prepare, and you can still test and work out how to grow the mobile app, what are the right ways to grow the mobile app when that's ready to launch. Either use something like usertesting.com or one of these sort of testing platforms to put it in front of people and see how they, you can get sort of workable Figma versions of it and things like that, and see if what you can learn in this sort of waiting period. I think back where, I mean, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because you've got to kind of demonstrate to investors that you've got that demand and that continual growth. But I think if you frame that as we're putting this off because we know that's the wrong thing to do. Our users have told us that. We know that's not there. This is here's what we've managed, what we're learning and doing to prepare for that. I think that's the best thing to do.
Yeah, thank you. That's quite reassuring. And we continue to flog our 100 users, of course, to gain more information. But thank you, because that's one of the things that keeps me up at night.
Thanks,
Matt.
Maddie.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. It's super useful to hear your insights. So my question is around sort of early user growth when your potential market is really broad. So a bit of context, my company is a social app that connects people that share the same hobby. We've got over 200 hobbies people can choose from on the app. So super broad potential user market. But in the early stages, because the whole point is users connect with each other, we're dependent on network effects. I want the initial users to do the same hobby. So we've initially focused a lot of the targeted marketing on the hobby groups that have got popular quite quickly. So for example, surfing, hiking and running took off as really popular hobbies. So I've gone to where do surfers get their information, where do hikers get their information, and targeted there rather than anything and everything. So just be super useful to get your insights on growing quickly in early stages when you could be really broad, but also trying to make sure that users are actually useful to each other.
Yeah, don't be really broad, I think is the advice. Double down on those ones that you're seeing that natural traction. There'll be something about those specific communities that it works. They haven't got something that some communities might have, or there's a mechanic about what they're doing that's kind of just lends itself to what you've built, more so than others. And I would lean into that and find out what that is. Use that as your template and really push that as far as you can before you try and replicate that across other hobbies. Andrew Chen was the early growth leader at Uber. He wrote an amazing book about network effects and talks a lot about how to devise this plan for replication, like mass replication. They did it with with cities, obviously, and the challenges that you get when sort of doing that, at scale. And I think that, that will be a very helpful book to read. I can't remember what the book's called, but Andrew Chen's his name.
Yeah, I think someone just put it in the chat. Yeah, that's super helpful. Thanks.
Anyone else want to, got a question or want to run through their specific situation and get some feedback from Matt? Feel free to raise your hand or just take yourself off mute and explain. Doug.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So just to give a background on what we do, we are a sports app for sports fans. We are looking at how sports fans can quantify and compare their opinions and what their overall fan personality is stacked up against friends, fellow fans, and sort of their rival fans. We've got loads of amazing data that we did last year where we were testing on our CPI. We went out and did a load of flyering. So we've got a load of data on how we could scale up. We know, sort of what our activation levels are across digital, physical, and a load of different marketing tests we did. Now, what we realize is that we're not yet showing any markers of product market fit. So our retention isn't at a level where it's worth us putting any more cash through our marketing channels. So we're going on a very residual user growth of people who find us organically. Well, I guess my question is around how we then go about communicating that wider, because as we speak to investors, as we speak to anyone, they say, right, well, what's your user numbers? And we say, well, we're focusing on retention, and they say, all right, we'll come back to us when you've got 20,000 users. So we're at a really funny sort of pain point where we know exactly how we can scale once we find sort of the levels that we would consider to be our product market fit. But exactly as you said earlier in the conversation, sometimes it can be too early to start your marketing because you should be focusing on retention.
Yeah, it's such a tough place to be, and I don't know if I have a real answer to that. I think you've got to just demonstrate that that if you've got the proof that we've got the channels that can scale, we know what we can achieve with them. It is just common. It's just sensible to not waste money to not retain users, and any growth growth sort of specialist head of growth will know that their job before actually adding any scale should be product market fit, and everyone should be on product market fit before you've got it. So if you're finding that it's a barrier to investment, then it kind of comes back to this problem I've seen a lot of times with founding teams thinking that once you've got that sort of institutional money sort of breathing down your neck a little bit, saying you need to get more users, you need to go quicker, it can be counterproductive, because you're just accelerating your burn rate. You're just going through your runway faster and faster, and if that's the sticking point, then I don't know if you've got a way around that with those particular conversations. It might just be one that you just have to accept that they're not going to be the right ones, and you have to just knock on a lot of doors there. So it's
based
tough
on
right thing.
Based on what Maddie was just saying, and then I put it the cold start problem, which is that we've re-strategized. We're launching again, coming off of open beta into a more sort of trying to find more growth, because we feel like we just aren't showing the markets. And our focus now really is on atomic networks, so trying to find small niche micro networks that we can get to start to make the network feel full, because we think that that's where a lot of our problems is coming, is that going on and trying to find fan consensus and see as a sports fan how you compare is only fun if there's enough data for you to be comparing it against, which we generate in-app with a combination of looking outside the app as well. So the cold start problem is something that we're really taking on, but still we find that exactly as you say, that conversation where we need to talk about growth versus retention to be quite difficult.
So maybe it's a case that you actually need to get to that point where you've demonstrated that actually we now have not necessarily solved the retention problem, but we've made significant steps to it, and we've got a line in the sand by which we're going to you know, we're going to get it to this point, and then we, you know, we add the scale, then we add, you know, the growth. I think that's all you can do.
Awesome. Ella, I saw you had your hand raised before. Do you want to go through your situation quickly if you are there still?
Yeah, sure. I wondered, with the whole current climate of growth versus profitability, how you are best to navigate that. We are about to close our first proper institutional round, and we do have quite a lot of pressure on us for like hitting profitability sooner. But obviously, if you make those decisions, you can sometimes sacrifice growth. What would you recommend?
Well, congrats on the raise.
But we're not there yet, almost.
Or, you know, on the progress towards it. That's good. Yeah, you know, the pressure for, you know, more profitable customers and a better sort of, you know, a CAC LTV ratios, because that's just builds more defensibility, right? You can reinvest more into the business and more into growth. So growth becomes a moat that is directly tied, you know, it's not one or the other. It should fuel the other. You know, I think a lot of businesses look at growth as kind of a traditional funnel. And you know, I do this as well. It's the simplification, but you know, you pour in the top and something comes out the bottom, and that's your profit, and you want to just make that as efficient as possible. But actually, in reality, growth is a loop. You know, you acquire a user and they give you money. That money goes back into the top, and you can acquire more users. And it's about getting that, building that loop rather than the funnel. I think that is kind of what maybe you know, is underneath what they're suggesting about, you know, going for profitability. So I think you've got to tie them together.
Are you seeing that much in the wider space at the moment, that people are prioritizing more profitability now versus a few years ago, where it was all about, like, you know, throw as much money into marketing as you can?
Yeah, I think so. I think like what I've seen from, you know, the startups I've spoke with over the last couple of years is that the time to profitability has shrunk significantly. There's not the patience there was, and that just because I think most B2C businesses are now in a place where, you know, consumer spending has been, you know, hit quite severely in the last couple of years. So, you know, you're just not going to have that luxury of taking your time to get there now, and that's, you know, that's cost a lot of startups. You know, I was working with a startup that, you know, basically had the rug pulled under them from under them, you know, a point where they were about to raise some money, and they said, well, actually now you need to be profitable a year sooner than you planned. It's tough. I think, you know, if you can try and tie that together, and I was going to sort of suggest a resource for this as well. Brian Balfour, on his Reforged series, talks a lot about like growth as a moat and growth loops rather than funnels, and how the two work together, and how like you can think about that. So I'll share that. I'll dig that resource out and share it as well.
Thank you.
Awesome. That's all the time we've got. If anyone, I know we're going to send out the calculator and that resource there, but if anyone wants to get in touch with you or have a quick conversation, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Matt Thomas. It's probably not the easiest to find, given I've got two of the most common names in the world, but hopefully you can find me on there, or you can follow me on Twitter, Matt Thomas 88. Or you know, Purdy, feel free to give my email out if anyone wants some help. Always happy to have a chat about growth.
Great. I'm just going to post your LinkedIn in the chat now, because then it'll be easier for everybody to connect with you. But we will stop recording and say thank you and goodbye, Matt.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. All great to meet you all.
Great to meet you. Take care.